The key creaked between my fingers as if the house itself were resisting my return. The door swung open with a sharp sound that echoed in the silence. I stepped inside. This was not my home. It was an empty replica of what it had been. Every room, every corner, spoke of absences and memories. Dust covered the furniture like a layer of pain, obscuring the life that once flourished here. I approached the living room window and looked out at the garden, now overgrown and wild, as if completely abandoned. But it wasn't abandoned. Mateo was there, at the upstairs window, watching me with a cold, almost mocking smile. It was as if he were saying, "It's all yours now." Pain suffocated me, but her gaze pushed me forward. I had to fight for what was mine, for what I had built with my own hands, for the legacy of my family. "This is not my end. I am stronger than they think," I murmured, as if speaking to a part of myself that was already losing hope. Clara emerged from the parlor and handed me a letter sealed with notary stamp. I opened it with trembling hands, my eyes searching for words that would confirm my worst nightmare. The lines blurred before me, like faded ink in an old photograph, until only key phrases remained. Property transfer, transfer to name of... And there it was, written in black ink, the result of familial betrayal. Mateo looked at me from the window, with that same cold smile, as if he had decided the house belonged to no one but him. The air in the courtroom was thick and heavy, as if every word spoken hung suspended in silence. Mateo, with that false smile that irritated me so much, had donned a new suit for the occasion. He looked at me from his seat, and his eyes shone with a satisfaction that chilled my blood. The judge, a corpulent man with severe features, gave Mateo the floor. "As you can see, Your Honor, the evidence is clear," Mateo began, extending the bank statement for all to see. "My transfers demonstrate that I have been financially supporting the household for the past few years." My heart contracted. I knew my sister Clara had told Mateo everything about my accounts, how I managed them, and how much money I had saved. It was a cruel betrayal, as if it were not enough to try to take my house from me. "As for ownership," Mateo continued, "the deeds are in my name." The judge frowned. "Any comments on this, Mrs. Cecilia?" I rose with difficulty, my hands trembling. I tried to remain calm, to recall my lawyer's words. "Your Honor," I said in a firm voice, "while it is true that Mateo has financially contributed to the household in the past, there is no evidence that I abandoned the property. With determination, I stated, this is not the end for me. I am stronger than they think." I offered the witness's letter and the lease agreement as evidence. Clara's lawyer, a thin, nervous man, attempted to refute my arguments, searching his papers anxiously. His words lacked conviction. I knew the evidence was in my favor, but the tension was thick in the air. My family, seated in the front rows, watched me with a mixture of sadness and suspicion, as if they didn't know what to believe. Then, suddenly, a shrill sound cut through the silence, the bell announcing the arrival of the police. The judge quickly called for order, but it was clear that something important was happening. The tension rose even higher. "I deeply regret this inconvenience," the judge said in a grave voice. "I will have to adjourn the session for today. I will take some time to review the documents and issue my ruling shortly." The notary's provisional sentence hit me like a blow. Based on the property deeds Mateo had presented with such conviction, he ripped the house from my grasp. As if my struggle to keep it had never existed. As if my memories were not as real as the paper and ink. I tried to appeal to the court, but their decision was even crueler. Clara became the legal owner of the home I built with my own hands. I couldn't understand how this was possible. "This is an injustice. It's all a lie," I shouted at the judge, my voice little more than a whisper against the icy reality before me. But the words hung in the air, disregarded by his impassive gaze. Then Mateo, as if the entire situation wasn't already unbearable, presented a restraining order against me. I was prohibited from approaching the house, not even peering into the garden where we used to enjoy our morning coffees. I felt trapped in a labyrinth of deceit, each step forward pulling me closer to the abyss. Clara, with a cruel smirk on her lips, presented the latest bank statement as evidence. It was ironic. I had been the one transferring money to keep the house afloat while battling this legal war. But now it was being twisted into proof of my neglect. My lawyer, an honest and honorable man to his core, found himself facing an ethical dilemma. The evidence Clara presented was questionable. He knew he couldn't use it to appeal, but he also couldn't ignore it. His gaze mirrored the same uncertainty that gnawed at me. How could we win this battle if the system itself was stacked against us? In the courtroom, as the judge ordered a more thorough examination of the evidence, uncertainty gripped the room. Glances met with suspicion, as if each gesture spoke a hidden language understood only by us. The tension was palpable, but I remained calm. My future, the fate of my family home, depended on it. "This is not my end. I am stronger than they think." That phrase gave me strength, reminding me why I was there. The lawyer paced nervously, reviewing once more the letter of abandonment. It was his main weapon to demoralize me, to turn my arguments into wind in favor of change. "How is it possible that I signed this if I don't remember doing so?" I asked for the umpteenth time, trying to make my voice sound firm in the face of the panic that gripped me. The lawyer grimaced, and with a mocking tone said, There are witnesses, Cecilia, and the date coincides perfectly. But I knew something was wrong. My mind kept going over every detail as if searching for a crack in that wall of lies. Then I saw it. A slight change in the shape of the letter, a different stroke in the signature. It wasn't my signature. My heart raced. The lawyer continued speaking, but my ears were deaf to his words. The truth was there, hidden in plain sight. I searched for the letters that had been handed to me, the ones supposedly containing proof of abandonment. I examined them carefully, comparing the handwriting in each document. All were different, all except the letter of abandonment. It was as if Matteo had used a template to forge my signature. Suddenly, a cold sweat ran down my spine. What I feared was becoming reality. The family doubted their own version, looking for explanations for the falseness of the signature. The judge then issued his ruling. The house will be released to Cecilia while the validity of the abandonment letter is investigated. Euphoria surged through me, but my joy was short-lived. Matteo, knowing he was in trouble, reacted with irrational fury. He attempted to dispose of the box containing the hidden evidence. Noticing his suspicious behavior, the judge issued a protective order for Cecilia. Matteo must stay away from Cecilia and her house for the duration of the investigation. The courtroom was packed. The judge, a man with a stern gaze and rigid posture, had declared himself impartial under pressure from my lawyers. It was a victory, but only partial. Clara desperately tried to discredit my testimony with that forged bank statement. Clara desperately tried to discredit my Cecilia has always had problems with money, she shouted from her seat, with Matteo standing beside her like a bulwark. But this time I had something more substantial than unfounded accusations. The witness's letter, delivered just in time by Elena, Matteo, and Clara's former neighbor. Elena had witnessed with her own eyes the evidence of their abandonment. I saw it with my own eyes, he declared in court. His voice was firm, filled with conviction, like a torch illuminating the truth amidst the darkness. Matteo faced charges of fraud and forgery. His lies crumbled like a house of cards in the wind, and worst of all for him, his own family, ashamed by his actions, turned their backs on him. Suddenly they were all on my side. My mother, my sister, my cousins, all united by a common cause, to reclaim the house I built with my own hands. Justice was beginning to prevail. And then, when everything seemed to point towards victory, the judge raised his hand and said, in a firm voice, based on the evidence presented, I am obligated to declare the property irretrievably to Cecilia. I felt the weight of all those weeks, of all the preparations, of every legal battle fought. This was the final hearing, the one that would decide the fate of my house, the family home I built with my own hands. The room was packed, the atmosphere as tense as a wire about to snap. They looked at me with reproach as I entered, Matteo and Clara seated beside their lawyers, as if I were the one who had stolen what rightfully belonged to them. But this was not my end. I am stronger than they think, I told myself once more, clutching the phrase that had become my shield during these months. The judge, an imposing man with a severe gaze, called my name. I introduced myself with a firm voice, gathering the momentum of the expectant audience. I presented the property deeds, which clearly showed that I was the legitimate owner of the property. Then, the bank statement, detailing the money transfers that allowed me to finance the construction of the house. And finally, the witness testimony letter from the neighbor who had witnessed the buying and selling process. Each document was another brick in the wall that built my defense. Matteo attempted to ridicule my evidence, claiming they were forgeries. But Clara, with an unusually conciliatory tone, said, while I do not share Cecilia's actions, I believe it is fair that she be given the opportunity to defend her property. His testimony, though unexpected, gave me a small glimmer of hope. The judge, after hearing the arguments and reviewing the submitted documents, struck the gavel forcefully. Silence fell over the courtroom. His eyes scanned my shoulders, my face, as if peering into my very soul. And then he said, after a thorough examination of the documents and testimonies presented, the court declares ownership of the property to Cecilia. The tension in the room was palpable. The lawyers leaned forward intently. Matteo's eyes shone with anxiety, and Clara seemed oblivious to everything, as if this were merely a film she was watching from afar. I, Cecilia, kept my gaze fixed on the judge, waiting for his final judgment. This house, built with my own hands, was part of my soul. It was all that remained of love, joy. Till Matteo and Clara arrived, they took everything from me. But I wouldn't let them get away with it, not without fighting for every brick, every window, every memory etched into these walls. What hurts most is knowing that my own family sees me as a ghost in the house I built with my hands. It was an open wound, bleeding with each unfounded accusation of abandonment, but I would never surrender. This isn't my ending. I am stronger than they think, I whispered to myself, recalling my own leitmotif phrase. The judge rose, banged his gavel, and said in a firm voice, the property belongs to Cecilia. Matteo has been found guilty of fraud for forging documents, and Clara is stripped of her position on the consortium's board of directors. A sepulchral silence descended upon the room until, like a volcano awakening, jubilation erupted. My lawyers embraced me tightly, my tears mingling with the emotion. Mateo was immediately arrested and Clara was left powerless, without her mask of security and kindness. Finally, there was justice. They had tried to destroy my life, but I had been stronger than their lies. Cecilia's family gathered in the house courtyard. It was a scene filled with joy, laughter, and embraces. "I can't believe it," said my younger sister as she hugged me tightly. "You fought so hard, and in the end, it has all been worth it." My mother, with tears of happiness in her eyes, kissed me on the forehead. "We have always supported you, Cecilia," he whispered. The community gathered around us. They looked at me with admiration, recognizing my courage and determination. We had won, but the path had been long and painful. "This is not my end. I am stronger than they think," I repeated softly, knowing that this victory was only the beginning. The new keys felt heavy in my hand, cold as the steel that once formed the chains of this battle. I turned the lock carefully, hearing the soft click that announced the end of a dark chapter. The door opened and the afternoon sun flooded me with a warm welcome. It was my home. I was back. This is not my end. "I am stronger than they think," I whispered softly, reminding myself of the words that had sustained me for so long. A neighbor, Juan, saw me pass and ran towards me with a genuine smile. His wife, Maria, followed him, her eyes shining with emotion. "Cecilia, you did it! You did it!" exclaimed Maria, embracing me tightly. Juan nodded his head, looking at me with pride. "You have proven to be stronger than the unfounded accusations and the obstacles they placed in your path." His words resonated in my heart like a symphony of support. The sound of the door opening didn't just symbolize my return home, but also my return to the core family. The essence of my being, the home I had yearned for so often, now stretched before me, filled with possibilities and renewed hope. As I crossed the threshold, I felt a weight lifting from my soul. In the living room, a warm light bathed every corner. There was my family gathered, their faces brimming with joy. The table was laden with home-cooked food, aromas often present at our family gatherings. Their eyes shone with happiness at my arrival. They were the vibrant colors of a dawn after a long storm. In that moment, I understood that true victory resided not only in regaining the house, but in reconnecting with my roots, with the people who always loved and supported me. This house was more than bricks and mortar. It was the symbol of my family's love, strength, and resilience. I sat in my office, a space I had never used as such before, with the property deeds spread out on the desk. The pages crackled under my fingers as I went over them again and again. It was as if I tried to absorb every letter, every signature, as if that could return possession of something so essential to me. My house, the house I built with my own hands, brick by brick. I remember the day I signed the bank transfer when I married Thomas. The excitement, the security, perhaps naivete, of a future shared. "This is not my end. I am stronger than they think. I thought then, and those words became my mantra these past few months. Now, I observed the documents as if they were pieces of an incomplete puzzle. Mateo, with his cold smile, had stolen that security, that sense of belonging, leaving the house empty of joy and full of bittersweet memories. In the midst of the silence that invaded my office, the doorbell rang. Clara entered without asking, a letter from the notary in her hands. "For you," she said, her tone as neutral as ever. I felt a lump in my throat when I recognized Mateo's lawyer's handwriting. The paper fell onto the desk next to the deeds, and I watched it, not knowing what to say or how to react. Suddenly, his presence invaded me. The same look I had seen in my husband during his last days. A cold and implacable gaze. Clara turned to leave, but before she left the door, she murmured, "I imagine it will be full of surprises." I was left alone with the weight of the words and documents on the desk. The notary had put away the letter, but he had left the lawyer's signature in place. The pressure suffocated me like a dark velvet blanket. The silence in the family home was denser than before. Every breath seemed like a reproach. "This is not my end. I am stronger than they think," I murmured to myself, clinging to that phrase like a life preserver. Juan, the neighbor, passed by to greet me in the hallway. He stopped by my front door, his face etched with sadness and concern. "Cecilia," he said, "I'm here if you need anything. All the rumors? Well, it's hard not to hear them." I tried to smile naturally, but I knew my gestures were as empty as an echo in an abandoned well. I couldn't help but think of the strange looks from the neighbors, the hushed words as they passed, the feeling of being judged for something I hadn't done. I felt the weight of the conflict upon me, enveloping me like a cold and opaque fog. The phone rang, interrupting my gloomy thoughts. It was Clara's lawyer. His voice was a sharp knife, cutting and threatening. "Cecilia," he said, "your negligence is causing irreparable damage. You should seriously consider giving up what belongs to you." The call left me cold, with a sense of impotence in my stomach. I felt like I was walking on ice, every step an imminent risk. I went to my study, seeking comfort in the property's deeds. I searched through the papers until I found the abandonment letter, the one that claimed to have been signed by me. Neighbor Maria had delivered it to me with a look full of sadness and confusion. "Cecilia," she said, "I don't know what to tell you. I saw it with my own eyes. That signature." I gazed into her eyes, attempting to decipher her feelings, but she seemed uncertain, as if caught in this labyrinth of doubts herself. I clutched a bank statement my former financial manager had given me. I searched for the transfer date, the same date on which I was supposed to have signed the letter of resignation. I scrutinized the details, comparing them with the signature on the letter. And then I saw it. Unfamiliar signature. A handwriting so different from my own that it froze me in place. My heart pounded like a frantic drum as I crossed the threshold of the courtroom. I felt the weight of eyes on me, a myriad of insatiable gazes watching my every step. It was difficult to tell if they were compassionate or judgmental. The only thing I knew was that my hands were clenching tighter with each step I took towards the bench where I had to sit. Mateo, he had caused all this. I knew he would, but I couldn't help feeling struck by the cruelty of his act. This isn't my end. I am stronger than they think, I murmured to myself like a mantra. The words were a lighthouse in the storm that was closing in on me. When I rose from the bench, I felt the weight of the accusations hanging in the air like a dark shadow. The courtroom was packed with people, some familiar, others strangers, all observing me with a mixture of curiosity and condemnation. My lawyer, a thin man with weary eyes, offered me a reassuring smile that failed to ease the lump in my throat. Like a ghost, he appeared before those he had given love, home, and security to for so many years. The judge, a man of stern gaze and booming voice, called my case. I felt like a chess piece moved without mercy by forces beyond my control. "Cecilia is responsible for abandoning the family home," he said in a cold, calculated voice. "It is necessary to evict her from the property to protect your interests." The echo of his words reverberated through the room, piercing like a dagger. With an impassive gaze, the judge announced the eviction motion over the property deeds. I was frozen by the stark reality of his decision. "Cecilia is granted one final opportunity to present documents refuting the accusations," the judge said, his voice booming like thunder in the silent room. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled Don Ricardo's office. It was a comforting scent, as if it could erase the worries gnawing at me entirely. "This isn't my end. I am stronger than they think," I whispered to myself as I looked at the documents on the table. Property deeds, bank statement transfers, witness letters, all these pieces of the puzzle that, perhaps, could help me rebuild my life. I had arrived with the determination to reclaim what was mine. The family home, built with my own hands and dreams, had become a minefield of false accusations. Mateo, my own brother, and Clara, his wife, had allied themselves to strip me bare. They saw me as a ghost, as if I had never existed, as if the only thing that mattered was money. Mr. Ricardo listened intently to every word, his gaze piercing like a laser, analyzing my pain and my determination. At the end of my story, he paused for a moment as if wrestling with an invisible shadow. "It's complicated, Cecilia," he said in a grave voice, "but not impossible. We have the evidence in your property deeds, but I will need more proof to counter their accusations. The witness letter you have provided is crucial. And that bank transfer, it's a double-edged sword," he said. A palpable tension hung in the air. Clara entered the office as if it were her own domain. Her smile was false, cruel. "Mr. Ricardo," she said with a voice that was sweet yet firm, "my husband and I have been paying all the household bills for years. Cecilia hasn't contributed anything. It's clear she has forgotten her family and abandoned her responsibilities." She presented her bank statement as if it were irrefutable proof. But in my gaze, she saw the certainty. They would not defeat me, not without a fight. Mr. Ricardo picked up the phone. "I will prepare a legal document that refutes the accusations of abandonment," he said firmly, "and we will contact the rest of the witnesses to obtain their testimonies." Suddenly, a brilliant light flooded the study. A notification on Mr. Ricardo's phone interrupted him. His face changed color as if he had seen something terrifying. "I cannot attend to this now," he said in a trembling voice. "It is a message from an unknown number, but he is warning me that this action is dangerous. Very dangerous." There was a tense calm in the air, as if tension had condensed into every corner of the family home. I felt more alone than ever, but that feeling didn't paralyze me. "This isn't my end. I am stronger than they think," I repeated mentally for the umpteenth time. I had to maintain control, had to be relentless. I moved between rooms with the same speed and determination as I had faced this trial, reviewing each document as if it were a clue that brought me closer to the truth. My neighbor Maria had been my only light in all of this, the only one who hadn't been dragged down by the unfounded accusations of abandonment. She held in her hands an old bank statement with transfers, something that no one else seemed to remember. I met her in her kitchen, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. "Maria," I told him, "we need that testimony to be as clear as possible." I showed him the witness's letter, and together we drafted a joint statement, with each word carefully chosen to expose the truth. The lawyer reviewed the document and sent the response to the notary. However, things were not clear-cut. Clara, my own sister, began to doubt her stance after seeing the strength of my arguments. Her wavering glances at the trial made me feel a pang of pain, but I didn't let myself succumb to melancholy. And Matteo, as if he were a predator waiting for the opportune moment, sent a message with a veiled threat. It tickled my skin, that sensation of latent danger that I had never experienced before. Suddenly my mind filled with harrowing images. Was it possible that he was truly playing with me? That night, as I lay down to sleep, a dark shadow fell across the hallway, as if something or someone was trying to get my attention. The next day, I found a note on the front door with a single word written in capital letters: Finn. The following weeks were a whirlwind of emotions. Every day brought new challenges, unfounded accusations that made me feel like a ghost in my own home. This isn't my end. I kept repeating it to myself, holding on to the phrase like a lifeline. But fear, like a shadow, always stalked me. Then came an unexpected turn. The lawyer, while reviewing the documents Clara and Matteo used to justify their ownership of the house, discovered a significant error in the registration date. It was small, but big enough to undermine their entire argument. I felt relief, perhaps for the first time since all this began. But Clara wouldn't give up so easily. She tried to manipulate one of the witnesses, an old friend from the neighborhood, into changing his testimony. I heard her tell him, "Cecilia is not the same person anymore. She's fragile and unstable. We need to make sure the court has a clear picture of who she really is." My blood ran cold. I was struggling to stay afloat, that much was true, but that didn't excuse his cruelty. At that moment, while sifting through my father's filing cabinet, I stumbled upon a hidden document among old papers. It was a letter written by him years ago, confirming his intention to leave me the family home as an inheritance. The discovery filled me with both hope and fear. How would Matteo react to this? And then it happened. The lawyer received a formal complaint against Matteo for fraud. He was supposedly accused of falsifying financial documents on previous occasions, which seemed to confirm my theory that he and Clara were willing to use any method to get what they wanted. Matteo, furious, stayed alone in the family house while I was at the lawyer's office. I saw him from afar, entering the basement with the letter that had been in my hands. His face contorted with anger and fear. He tried to destroy it, but a part of it escaped his fury. The lawyer examined the property deeds I had kept so carefully for years. They returned my gaze every time I looked at them, as if they remembered the promises made and broken. As if they remembered the promises made and broken. "This is not my end. I am stronger than they think," he whispered softly, as the lawyer presented the evidence before the judge. His voice was firm, resonating in the room filled with expectant silence. It was as if he had recovered a piece of my soul lost during the legal battle. Then I turned to Clara, who remained silent and pale. She looked like a ghost, just as she had in her story. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Clara was being investigated by the police for forgery. I glanced at my lawyer. His face reflected a small gesture of satisfaction. The case was turning in my favor, and it was only a matter of time. "Yiga Cecilia," said the lawyer with a smile. "Your strategy is working. Next week we will explain the truth about the unfounded accusations of abandonment to the court." I felt relieved, but I couldn't let myself be carried away by euphoria. I knew there was still a long way to go. Then I did it. I called Matteo's family. A pang of pain shot through me as I remembered their hurtful words during the trial. I needed them to understand my side of the story. But his voice on the other end of the phone confirmed that Matteo had moved away. He had left the neighborhood as if he had never been here. A shiver ran down my spine. The case was nearing its conclusion, yet a single question remained unanswered. Would I be able to reclaim my home and the longed-for peace? Trembling hands held the paper reality had torn from me. It was more than just an eviction notice. It was a direct blow to the heart, an affront to everything I had built. I stood there, amidst the empty hall of my house, unable to breathe, as if the air itself had been sucked from me. The silence grew larger, heavier, until all that remained was the frantic beating of my own heart. "This isn't my end," I murmured, my voice a mere whisper. "I am stronger than they think." But in that instant, the mantra sounded like a distant echo, an empty promise in the void of pain. Clara had chosen an outside lawyer, a cold and calculating man, who regarded me as if I were a specimen under study. His gaze was piercing, capable of reading my fears, my doubts, even the cracks in my soul. The office was a labyrinth of cold and impersonal rooms, where the scent of paper and ink mingled with the metallic tang of fear. I sought comfort in the evidence the witness had provided me. A letter written in trembling script that spoke of the good relationship between my father and myself, as if it could dispel the storm brewing on the horizon. My lawyer, a kind but weary man, tried to find a mediator, someone who could bridge our positions, guide the situation before it was too late. But Clara was resolute, her greed relentless, and she seemed to show no mercy for the ruins she was about to build in my life. That night, sleep eluded me like a wounded bird. Anxiety constricted my chest, an invisible knot that refused to loosen. Shadows danced in the darkness, projecting distorted images of my home, my memories, my own family. The family mansion felt colder, emptier, like a tomb awaiting its final inhabitant. At dawn, the hours ticked by with the relentless click-tock of the clock. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, casting a golden ray across the room. It was 3:07 a.m. when,